we made some minor changes in order to make it a little bit more understandable and that the whole CAP plan makes sense in the blogs and it's a balanced provision of information. So you will see there the different chapters. I will not explain what is behind because today the focus is on chapter 5. On this section, which is the purpose and the objective of this webinar today, which is the description of the intervention. So it's there where I will focus my intervention. So as part of the description of the intervention, we are talking mainly about Article 99. So this is where the description of the intervention is laid down, and there are several chapters, several fields that will need to be filled in. There is a very basic information, and now I think it would help because most of you are familiar with the SFC structure. So when you set up a new intervention, when you are filling in your SFC and then you have to create a new intervention for the CAP plan, the first thing you will see is a set of basic information that will allow the member state to create this intervention for the CAP plan. So in this basic information, you will see first, well, the name that you will give this to this intervention, because this is, of course, a free text. It's not pre-filled in the basic text, in the basic act. So you will be able to define the name as you wish, and there will be an automatic code assigned by the system. So we can trace it and we can link it in the different sections of the CAP plan. Then you will, of course, have to select the fund that will support, finance that intervention, of course, one of the two. Then you will see a drop-down menu where you will be able to select the type of intervention. So if we are talking, of course, about rural development, you will have Article 65 for management commitments, 66 for ANCs, and so on and so forth. So you will select one and only one of these type of interventions, which are predefined by the legal text. And then following the changes in the Council, in particular in Article 99, you will have to select one single output indicator for that intervention. And of course, you will be offered a set of output indicators that are relevant for that type of intervention. So in case that you select investment, Article 68, then of course you will see the different output indicators that go together with that type of intervention. So we facilitate a little bit the introduction of data, and you will select only one, and this is very important because this will facilitate also afterwards the tracing of this intervention and the type of input that we will require from you depending on the output indicators that you have selected. Then you will have to tell us what is the territorial scope. On this one, so far we have always said that the regionalized intervention are possible, of course. So this is the place where you can select whether this intervention is defined at national level or it's a regional intervention, and in that case you have to provide well the name of the region or the territorial scope that it's that goes along with this regional intervention. I will talk a bit more about the territorial targeting, which is a different issue, and we have placed this data in a different chapter. But on this one,
Gregorio,
yes.
I apologize for interrupting you. Colleagues are asking whether you might be able perhaps to just move from your screen, from the slides. There are a few elements on the screen that we see in black. If you can minimize them, if you can perhaps remove from the slide so that it can be seen in full by everyone. Yeah, exactly.
I see what
exactly.
you mean. Okay.
If you manage to, that's perfect.
Sure,
on the
sure.
side,
yeah.
Fantastic.
There you go.
Sorry for the interruption.
No, very helpful. Yeah, indeed you're watching my screen, so yeah, you are seeing things that are not relevant. So I will continue then. I was talking about you're welcome. About the territorial scope, so you will have to make this split, national or regional. Then from the specific objectives, you have to link one or more specific objectives to that intervention. So we will offer you a set of recommended, I mean, if you've been following a bit the discussions on monitoring and evaluation and the GREGs notably, there have been many discussions about this matrix where you will have certain specific objectives that are more likely to be used for a specific type of interventions. We have always maintained that this will not be a fixed and a compulsory attribution. The link can be designed in a flexible way, but we will recommend certain specific objectives depending on the type of intervention that to facilitate again the introduction of the information by the member state. As regards the result indicators, well, it's pretty much the same. So depending on the specific objectives that you have selected, you will be offered a set of result indicators that are the ones more relevant, or we consider more relevant, to capture the contribution to those specific objectives. Of course, again, the result indicator list is open, so you eventually could select any other result indicator from Annex 1, but we will offer you a selection, a predefined selection, to facilitate the introduction of such information. Just let me also indicate that if the intervention defines several unit amounts, and the unit amounts, they have a specific contribution to different result indicators. This can also be made at that level, but I will explain this a bit later. But then, I mean, just to be clear, this can be attributed at the level of the intervention, or eventually, if necessary, can be attributed also at the level of the unit amount. So once you have provided the basic information, then you create the intervention, and you will have to fill in a number of fields to help us assess the CAP plan and see to what extent it has the potential to contribute to the specific objective. So first of all, we will need to see the eligibility conditions. So this is the way it has been proposed by the Commission. It has not been changed by the Council or the Parliament. So in principle, you will have to provide the list of eligibility criteria, commitments, and other obligations to receive support. Then we will also need to see what is the targeting at the level of beneficiaries and the mechanisms that you have to target the support. So this would include, in principle, what are the principles of the selection criteria, or what are the intensity rates that you are using to support beneficiaries in one or the other way. Of course, this will be looked at with the link to the SWOT and with the link to the needs assessment, and the territorial targeting that I was referring before. So are there territories or areas that are receiving increased support, that they are excluded, that they are favored? So what is the territorial targeting, if any? This should be explained. In principle, in this field, it can also be in any other part of the CAP plan template, but we consider that this is part of the targeting, this is part of the eligibility conditions, and this will have to explain. I know that there are many discussions ongoing on the level of detail. This is not a clear-cut line that we can say, okay, here is the limit of the details that you have to provide, and you can go to that specific requirement or not. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of a qualified assessment that we have to make, and the opinion on this, well, it's not that straightforward. So in principle, the idea is that we get the information that is relevant to understand what is the targeting of the support, who will get the support from the CAP, and what are the conditions attached to that support, and if those are in line with the needs assessment, with the SWOT, and with the intervention strategy. So I think it's pretty much common sense, but I know that it's not very easy in practice to define. So what we would expect from the member state is that all the information that is relevant for the assessment, that will make us possible to assess the plausibility and the potential of this intervention to contribute to the objectives of the CAP plan and the CAP in general. Those are the ones that we expect to see there. Then there is a specific field which is also laid down in Article 99 on the description of the design that will ensure effective contribution to the specific objective. So this is just a qualified assessment of the eligibility conditions and the targeting mechanisms that will ensure the contribution to the specific objectives. So it's a sort of a more qualified assessment so we can see more clearly what are the expected, the potential benefits in terms of the contribution to the objectives. Then there is another field there which is very important to us, is the identification of the relevant baseline elements. So this is not just the listing of all the applicable national laws or the applicable GAECs. This is also again a more qualified identification of what are the relevant elements from the baseline that are used for the commitments or for the eligibility conditions that are included in the intervention. So we would like to see how far the commitment goes beyond the mandatory requirement. That's where we want to focus. So in order to do that, we need to know, of course, what are the baseline elements, but not only that, in a normative or formal way, we would like to see a bit of an assessment on how the commitments go beyond the relevant baseline elements. Let me finish this slide by highlighting what is an intervention as defined in Article 3 of the Strategic Plan Regulation. So intervention means a support instrument with a set of eligibility conditions as specified by the member state. So this is again another question, another discussion that we are having with many member states. So when it is justified to have a different intervention, and how far we can extend the intervention to fit many elements or many contributions or many definitions. So just please remember that we are talking about a single set of eligibility conditions that should encompass an intervention. So the moment that these eligibility conditions are substantially different, the targeting is substantially different, and the unit amounts are different from the others, if this whole comprehensive package, so to say, is different from the other one, then it would justify a different intervention. So that's a bit where we have made the distinction on this set of eligibility conditions. So this is a bit what I wanted to highlight at this stage. Then we move to another part very important from the intervention, which is the financial information. So here we have first the form and the rate of support. So you know that the form of support is a financial instrument or grant. And then the form of the grant, as laid down, if I remember correctly, in Article 77, is reimbursement, so cost incurred, the invoice-based system. Then you have the simplified cost option, so the three possibilities, the lump sum, the flat rate, and the unit cost. And then you will have to indicate the support rate, so the aid intensity of the intervention. Then for the method of calculation, you know that there are some payments that have to be linked to a specific calculation method. So basically all the area and animal-based payments are subject to an external certification in the case of rural development, of course, that will have to be annexed to the plan. And of course, the simplified cost option, there are several methods. We will need to see, as you currently do, the legal basis for this, if it's based on an ex-ante fair, equitable, and verifiable method, or if it's based on existing simplified cost options applying at national level. The whole set of different methods that are available. So we'll need to see which ones you are using without further details. Then you have the specific question for BIS. If you are using the territorialization possibility, then you have to indicate at this stage if this is the case. And if you are using the round sum for small farmers, it is expected, of course, to indicate what is the definition of a small farmer that you are using. We have here the colleagues from direct payment, so of course they are ready to step in for further details if necessary. Then the state aid assessment for rural development. So for the ones that are falling outside or mixed intervention of Article 42 of the treaty, then you have to select whether this is notification based, this is ABER, so the agricultural block exception, the general block exception, or de minimis. If it's the case of notification, you have to indicate the amounts, both EU national and the top-up amounts, in order to clear this state aid with the approval of the CAP plan or with the modification of the CAP plan. On the WTO assessment, we are still exploring how we can facilitate your life in the sense that there are some quite straightforward links between type of interventions and the WTO paragraphs of the Annex 2. And if that is the case, this information will be automatically filled in. If, depending on the design of the intervention, then there could be several paragraphs involved. Of course, we will need to see explicitly what is your assessment on whether one or the other paragraph should be used. So this is on the financial information, and then I will go to the unit amount and the indicative financial allocation. This is a quite simplified table that we have prepared for you. It's just to explain a bit, or to highlight that the indicative financial allocations are the expected level of payments. This has been changed by the Council, and we think it's a good change because it clarifies a bit better that there are no ceilings for rural development. There are no clear-cut financial allocations to be spent on a given year. There are expected level of payments that have to be indicated, and they are not binding. You know, for rural development, they are only binding at the end of the period and at the level of the type of intervention. So we also want to make that clear. This is a planning exercise, and in the case of rural development, there are certain flexibilities already embedded in the way the fund it's working financially. So this is important to have in mind. And then we also wanted to highlight that there are several possibilities in terms of unit amounts. So you can use one or several unit amounts depending on different variables that I will explain in a minute. So you can define the uniform, average, minimum, maximum. I will go to that. And the unit amount, it can be, as I said, defined one or several. And the planned output, this is also another flexibility that we agreed with the Council. We knew that it was quite difficult to estimate the number of outputs at the unit amount level. So there is a possibility to define aggregate outputs at the level of intervention. So you wouldn't have to to indicate the level of planned output with the unit amount, but at the level of the intervention. We think this is an important flexibility. Of course, it's optional, so for the member state to decide what is easier for them to do. So just very briefly, I will finish with 3 slides on what we consider that the role of the unit amounts, because this is very important in the design of the intervention, and there have been many discussions on this. So just to put some very important elements on the unit amount. So first of all, at least one unit amount should be provided for each intervention. This unit amount is the final amount that the beneficiary will get per unit, so per hectare, per head, per project, in the way it's defined the unit according to Annex 1 on the output indicators. Then there can be several unit amounts depending on variables like the ones that you can see there. So you can use one or more for the same intervention, as I have already said. This differentiation is important tool for targeting the support. So this is why we consider that quite relevant. Then the unit amount should be justified. I mean, in many cases, this is not the case for the cost incurred income foregone, so for IACS rural development payments, where no justification should be provided because this is certified externally, is based on cost incurred income foregone. But for the others, that there is a free selection or a free choice by the member state to set the unit amount, we expect a certain justification, not very detailed, but just to give us the link with the needs assessment, with the SWOT. So why this unit amount has been chosen, why will it well, fill the gap of the needs assessment that you've made. So we'll have to see a certain explanation or justification here on why this level has been decided and set. And the concept of uniform or average, just very briefly, we expect most of the rural development IX interventions to be uniform. That means that if you have set the cost incurred income foregone and you have predefined a payment per hectare depending on the commitment, that would be the uniform payment or unit amount, and there will be no deviation because member state cannot deviate from paying that given amount for that specific commitment. So that we expect that this will be a simple approach that will avoid any deviation whatsoever. But we also understand that this is not always the case, that there are some interventions where it's very difficult to estimate the exact uniform unit amount. So for that reason, as you have seen, the Council has introduced certain flexibility. So now there is this possibility to use average unit amount and this possibility to use maximum average unit amount. So these are the cases for which the uniform is not possible to be applied, and indeed it gives some flexibility in terms of deviating from this unit amount, because this will be an average and there will be a maximum average amount that will be taken for the performance clearance as a benchmark. So that's also important in terms of ensuring that the different intervention in the different plans, they have also the same granularity, the same level of details. So this is also important to have in mind as regards the unit amount. As I said, this is important as a benchmark for the performance clearance. So this will be used to assess whether the realized unit amount, whether its uniform average has complied with the plan, and therefore this would trigger a number of consequences that are laid down in the horizontal regulation. So basically, just to stress that the case of the uniform unit amount, in principle, there would be no deviation because this is the amount that is decided. If you are using several unit amounts, of course, each of them will be taken in isolation. So these are ratios that are independent. So there is no issue of double counting. Of course, the ratio will include all the outputs that have received this expenditure. So in principle, this is, and I think I went a bit longer than expected. Thank you very much for your attention. This is what I wanted to share with you, and I will be delighted to take your questions, whether at this stage or also, of course, in the breakout sessions for the specific interventions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gregorio. It's a pity